Well, we all know that The Apprentice made Donald Trump into a TV star, and now he's running his campaign like it's all still a reality show. Our next guest says that type of thing could become the norm in our social media obsessed society. A short time ago, Rich spoke with David Caputo, President Emeritus and Professor of Political Science at Pace University in New York.
You know what I thought was really telling, if anyone had any questions about the level of discontent, especially from the Republican establishment with the rise of Trump, was the day of Super Tuesday, you had Paul Ryan condemning the lack of a retraction or a quick enough retraction on the part of Trump related to David Duke and obviously his past association with the KKK. As much as they don't like it, go through a little 101 for my audience that if they show up to Cleveland for the convention and they don't have the magic number of delegates anyone, how a broker convention may or may not work.
There are a number of scenarios. Number one, the one that you raised is probably the easiest one for the Republicans, in that if Trump does not have a majority of delegates going into the convention, then there are numerous ways that he can lose. Even if he goes into the convention with a majority of delegates, there are also other possibilities. So a lot will depend on where he stands. If you look at the most recent Associated Press reports, of the total 695 delegates, Trump does not have a majority at this point. So he is short. The concern is he'll pick these up in the next couple weeks as the format for the elections begin to change. But as of now, it would be a brokered convention. I think as time goes on, I think the chances are much better that it will not be. So then the Republicans have to figure, they have a number of options available to them in terms of how to stop Trump.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you think is the most plausible one if they just decide they can't get their arms around him? Whatever they try, Chris Christie notwithstanding and a few others, they think that the down-ticket consequence would be so bad, and also setting the party so far back. What could they do about it?
Well, I think it is a significant set of developments for the party. The concern that they have is, remember, the Republicans, their national committee set the rules for the nominating process. Now what it would take would be a change in those rules as you go into the convention. And that could take a number of forms. One could be you simply indicate, this is assuming that the Trump has a majority of a small majority of the delegates going in. You could change the rules so that you're not bound to vote for your candidate on the first ballot. To do that, however, it would take a majority vote of the member of the entire convention, and if Trump has a majority of the delegates, that's going to be difficult, if not impossible. Second option would be, and I think this is one that's actually very interesting, and that is, remember that while we have 695 delegates selected, pledged to these various candidates, the actual delegates have not been selected in most cases. Take the case of Iowa. They're just beginning the process of selecting their delegates, even though their caucus was held over a month ago. So that it's possible that the Republicans could influence who gets selected to be Trump delegates, and perhaps those delegates would not either abstain or would help to cross over to vote for a change in party rules. Very risky business on the part of the Republicans. Can you imagine Donald Trump if he goes into the convention with a majority of the delegates? So I think the third option then for the Republicans is to say, okay, we're going to disavow this candidate and we're going to run a third-party candidate. And there the hope would be, I believe, not to really be able to win the Electoral College outright, but to stalemate the Electoral College to a point that it goes into the House of Representatives. And there the voting would be by state delegation. The Republicans control over 30 delegations in the House right now, assuming that continues afterwards. Assuming that their candidate would be one of the top three, they then could elect that person to be president. So it's a wild ride ahead. I think in the end, the Republicans may decide that it is better simply to abide by the rules they've created.
And for a couple of reasons, I think, David. One is, forgetting polls, because this is such a upended political process like I've never seen before. Who's to say that Trump couldn't even theoretically win? And secondarily, given the voter anger that's really driving Trump right now, and the really unfiltered anger towards what they see as the status quo, if they felt that this was robbed, the base that is, that this was robbed from Trump, imagine the backlash in the Republican Party. In many ways, would this be almost accelerating the end of the Republican Party as we know it if we're not already on the road to it now?
It would be very difficult for them to be able to rebuild. However, you have to realize that one of the reasons for the concern about Trump is, in addition to the concern about Trump as a candidate, is what impact he might have, especially on the Senate seats that are up. It's not inconceivable that the Democrats could recapture the Senate, which changes everything for the Republicans, regardless of who the president is. So, and then the other option, as you've pointed out, is that perhaps the Republicans might decide that, look, our best chance might actually be with Trump, and that if elected, then we'll do whatever we have to do to control him, especially if we keep control of the Senate and the House.
You know, David, some people have said, hey, we've seen this before. We saw this with Goldwater. But I'd argue that Goldwater was at least a reflection of a part of the party. Donald Trump is such an outlier. I don't know that there's a parallel. Do you disagree? Is there something in history you can say we've seen this before? No,
I think history going forward, I think Donald Trump is likely to be the first of what I would call the reality television, internet-based candidate. He's been very adept at how he has used the internet for his campaign. He's been very adept in changing the celebrity status, permits him to have large events and taking on a show-type quality. So I think that this may be the first, and he may be the mold that other candidates coming forward will be measured by. I don't think we can go back in American history because of the unique aspect of technology now and find this type of candidate.
We shall see. Hey, David, I certainly appreciate the time. David Caputo, thank you so much.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Up next, a couple of big headlines you might have missed today. A new development in the O.J. Simpson case and also updates on the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Stay with us.